It's affecting every.
Good evening to you and thank you so much for joining us.
I was informing you in the next 30 seconds so that
Hey, put the appears on the screen.
we are good.
Good evening, dear viewers. Thank you so much for joining us. We are glad to have you. Family TV, it's a Church of Uganda TV. And the program is The Bottom Line. The Bottom Line comes your way every Wednesday night, about this time to 11 p.m. We really hope that you're going to stay with us as we look at the issues that affect our nation. This week, it's been a couple of things. Also very personal for me. I will share a little bit of it, but also national events that we are going to focus on. And in studio with me to try and digest and share and talk about these things are three gentlemen. I will be introducing them a little while later, but the gentlemen that have been around for several of you, you know them. One of the issues we want to talk about is Uganda after the ballot. Uganda after the ballot has been an issue that we are talking about. People are talking about healing. It means they are wolves, without doubt. It talks about accountability, yeah, and I think every one of us should be accounting for themselves, but also publicly. And we want to examine a little bit the road ahead. So after the ballot, then what? So in this first segment, that's what we are going to be looking at. And later, you know, this week we were commemorating the Janan Room Day, the Saint Janan Room Day. So we'll be talking about the legacy of the late Archbishop of the Church of Uganda, Janan Room, who was murdered by the President Idi Amin. In studio with me is Dr. Daniel Rugarama. Dr. Daniel Rugarama is many things, a Pan-Africanist, a lawyer, many things. He's a regional panelist. Next to him is the man from the mountains, the man from the mountains of the east, Timothy Chomonges, and on my extreme right is the Honorable Joseph Ochieno. Ochieno is a regional political commentator, and Bwana Ochieno is also a UPC stalwart. Three of you gentlemen, you are very welcome. So first of all to you, the UPC stalwart, say hello to our viewers.
It's a pleasure to be here. This is a church television. It's a family program. It's a very late night program. As a social conservative, I would say that, well, this is family time, but being a program which talks about things that must affect the family, I thought I would be here. Although in this republic, you can never predict anything. That even on a Wednesday night, it takes you 3 hours simply because one man with a special family holds people in Kalero for 1 hour and 45 minutes. It is terrible, but being a man who does God, he's forgiven.
Yeah, since we are talking about healing, thank you so much. I think you've started us off so well. Healing is part of the process. Timothy Chemonges is the Executive Director of the Center for Policy Analysis.
Yes.
Yes, how can I forget that when I work with you quite a
Yeah,
lot?
yeah.
So Bwana Chemonges, you are very welcome. Say hi to our viewers.
Thank you, Baguma. I'm glad to be here. This is my debut and the first time to be in this specific station. And I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion. Definitely matters healing. We've come from a very protracted electoral process, and I think it's time for us to be more solution-oriented, really, to find what we can do as a country as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you know, Timothy, I think interact quite a lot. So I actually thought you had been here previously.
No, that's
I didn't realize this was your debut. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
This is also my debut on this program.
Oh, really? You know, these guys, we appear together quite often, so I thought you had
on
been
this,
here.
on this television, on this
yeah.
station, yes, I've made a few rounds here, but on this program, it's my debut.
So it's
yes.
my pleasure to host you guys,
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much.
Thank you so much for coming and being with us.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to an animated discussion, as you always present. The Global Geostrategic Analyst, Dr. Daniel Rugarama. Dr. Daniel Rugarama is a resident panelist and analyst. So thank you so much for coming. Say hi to our viewers.
A very good evening to our comrades and my brothers here, Chemonges and Comrade Ochieno. You forgot to mention that Ochieno is clad in, among others, a very nice red tie. And,
No, I thought you were still enjoying the Valentine mood, so that's why I didn't comment on it.
Uganda People's Congress is love and being the future.
and he doesn't care that
It's
even the
consistent
group
with the spirit and the values of the
Yes.
conversation. Yes.
has tried to dig into the Yakara. But most importantly, Comrade Baguma and our esteemed viewers, I'm glad that you chose this topic with the management, because this week I think has been the late Archbishop Janan Ruum, and I think like Professor Mbiti usually says, the dead are not dead, and in the case of Janan Ruum, he still lives amongst us. And,
Yes.
and his death,
Yes.
I'm glad, is not in vain.
Okay, so now, for me, my healing is different. It's very personal. You see, on the weekend, I buried my mother-in-law, the mother to my wife. I buried my sister and extremely good friend, Pamela, the student affairs dean of UCU, also village mate. And now, as I was driving back, they told me to go and bury my uncle to see me who was passed. And I'm thinking, okay, I need some healing.
Yeah.
So I debated quite a bit with my producer because I was on the road coming back today, whether I should really do come and host the program. Then I realized those people would be telling me, continue. Life must continue, actually. If you stopped, then you probably won't heal. So, healing. And I will come to you, Honorable Ochieno. We are talking about healing and the road ahead. Is it realistic? Are we being realistic post-election?
No, we are not, unfortunately. But that as it may, let me also record the fact that amidst all the tragedies, I came from the east to bury the mother-in-law to a very close niece of mine. Many of these deaths are senseless deaths. But I think as a civil rights activist, as a global Pan-Africanist, I think all of us will be sharing the fact that Africa has lost one of its most illustrious sons, the Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson, who also happens to be a fantastic man of God. I was lucky to meet him a couple of times, but I was particularly touched by the extent to which his eloquence rose across London in 2003 in the largest, I believe the largest demonstration UK has seen, that is the anti-war rally in London in 2003. And he was there. The one before that was the Mandela at 70, in which I was, but I don't know whether the Reverend Jackson was there. But particularly the fact that this gentleman was together with Dr. King. I was just telling a group of friends earlier today that actually turns out that both of these massive civil rights activists and leaders were actually religious leaders in an amazing way. Jackson went on to go into politics, stood for president twice. It's now a common social media thing and maybe boring people, but it's important that he stood in 1984 in America for the Democratic Party nomination. He didn't get it. In 1988 particularly, that was 1 year into my exile, talk healing. I had escaped narrowly from these NRA guys in town, and I was a little boy in London, but here am I with global television and Jesse Jackson roaring in America, waking up the African communities in America and waking up possibilities and talking slavery, talking imperialism, talking particularly at the time apartheid, which was still reigning in South Africa. But amidst that, he was trying he was presenting himself as whatever it is, we are all equal. And whatever it is, America needed to heal, because America is a land conquered by Anglo-Saxon guys who are now very privileged, and they thought they were giving the Dr. Kings privilege to simply just be Americans. One of the most important things, I'll stretch it a bit, but it's important as an introduction in context, is that, and I think one of your producers has heard me talk about these things, when because of racism, which is real, racism is real, and racism is bad. And as we condemn racism, we must also condemn identity chauvinism that taunts Africa, identity chauvinism that taunts the Republic of Uganda. In Uganda, they call it tribalism. It's a terrible thing. It's dirty, ugly. In UPC, we reject it. So Jesse Jackson was the most authentic candidate for the Democratic Party nomination in 1988, the most articulate, the most driven. He had mobilized the Democratic Party base, and particularly women and black people. But amidst that, he was still the unelectable candidate simply because he was black. So the most daring thing was for him to say this thing that I am a somebody. I am a somebody. We are a somebody. We are a people. We are somebody. We are people, meaning Africans. That thing drove African Americans heavy. This guy was giving hope and possibility to the Africans that from slavery to all this kind of exploitations, it's possible for them to grow and reach whatever it was. They peaked. But towards the end, what does the man say? The man say that I know I may not get there, but I qualify. He was the best candidate, he believed, but he may not be elected simply because of his color. Ended up, he was not elected. Michael Dukakis was elected. In fact, he performed better than Joe Biden in the primaries. Michael Dukakis, very dull guy, simply because he was white and privileged, got elected. That guy was very easily beaten by George Bush Sr. So Jesse Jackson rests, but this guy tore the whole world. This guy was one of these peace envoys, including Middle East and Cuba. We are talking post-elections. If we look at the Republic of Uganda and we look at the terror that this election process has subjected us, playing with money, playing with guns, playing with kibokos, playing with ugly names, some people have not settled into their home. Where are we? Maybe because it's the beginning of Lent, and maybe it's also the beginning of Ramadan, that all Ugandan citizens watching and others may take the courage from Jesse Jackson, who rests now, that me and you, we need to take the responsibility to
heal.
Make sure that we lead in the process of healing, but through practice.
To heal, yes. And you've added the Jesse Jackson angle, but Timothy Chemonges, we are talking about healing and looking ahead, post-election, with all the context and all the things that happen. Is this a realistic expectation?
I think that within our context, it is a desirable thing, but in terms of its practicality, it's something that may take time for us to realize. You know, part of the healing is that this must be it's a deliberate action, that the players in the space must take action. And healing is just one component, but also there is the broader perspective of the nationhood on how to strengthen that, because we've just again come from a very protracted election where we've abused ourselves, others have been arrested, others, you know, there are those that feel their votes or their win was stolen, and so there are definitely grievances. And what that means is that the players, those that have been affected, those that participated in contributing to the mess that could be there irrespective of the sector, should be able to come on the table. Are the players willing to come on the table? As it is now, I think that there seems to be no goodwill. And listening to all the sides, there could be valid reasons. But ultimately, the desire is that we sit down and discuss that. But I think there are factors that we may want to look at as we move there. That we do have institutions, either at the political party level, at religious level, or any other academia and all the civil society and all the other players. As we stand today, there seems to be a lot of disorganizations in these groupings. That, for example, you'll have Ochieng, who is a member of UPC, but may not see eye to eye with the person holding the position of the presidency, for whatever reason. You have the NUP, who some of the members, for some reason, there's a lot of fear within the party. The opposition member, the Chagulanyi himself, who is the leader of opposition, somehow is in the run. For whatever reason, I think that, so the infrastructure of ensuring that the country heals seems to be a bit broken, but not all is lost. When you look at those that have won the elections, if you hear the tone, if you hear the bravado, you hear the name calling of those that have lost, you clearly see that there seems not to be a deliberate attitude towards having a healing process. But also there are facts that probably we as a country may want to recognize. That today, President Museveni, who is the winner, the magnanimity that he should extend to other players can only be at goodwill, not because he's compelled. And that can only be at his goodwill to think that probably there is need for us to talk. As a matter of fact, he seems to have the majority everywhere. And so he can still proceed and run the government with or without the other players. At least that's the attitude that is there. The political players, the opposition, seem to believe that they can push and put the government to a place that they can have discussions at equal level, which is, I think, it's an impossibility at this time. The opposition, indeed, they are players, but they are coming as weak players in the table. Unfortunately, the opposition seems not to want to recognize that the president will come as the person in charge and seems to have a lot of leverage in this, and that any sort of conversation must be around his goodwill and his desire for the better, which is an assumption really, that probably President Museveni is out there and is really willing to ensure that we proceed peacefully. Probably the last component that would be is that for NRM and government, for power is to be kept, not to be given. In fact, that is their primary role, to ensure that they keep power at sometimes all costs. And so it means that the other players must be willing to understand the dynamics and the environment in which they are operating. And probably as we've started the Lenten season, the Ramadan period, probably this could be a good reflection time for us as a country to see what other better ways in which we can heal the wounds that have happened during the electoral process, but also recognizing that there have been other, the other underlying concerns within the country, not just as a result of the elections, that need to be listened to, that need to be acted on.
Dr. Garama, community is divided, family is divided, from what your colleagues are saying, political prisoners, opponents in the political contestation on the run, all these issues that your colleagues have raised. You are a hopeful person, at least from the episodes we have been together. Are we realistic to expect healing?
Yeah, we are very realistic to expect, contrary, of course, to the misgivings of my senior brother Ochieno, and probably he also has his reasons, which some he has presented, but we cannot afford to live in a country where we are hopeless. It would be very unfortunate. I read a book by Mongo Betty, Poor Christophe Bomba. That was way back, some good years back, to Set Boku. And there was a Father Dramont, a character. And there was an administrator, Monsieur Vidal, something like that. So when they were having a conversation, he said, now when you start doubting your mission, you are on your way to failure, if you have not failed already. It would be very sad for a country called Uganda, and for us who are opinion shapers and also partakers in this country, start doubting that we can be on a path of reconciliation and healing. I want to believe that we are therefore very correct and in being optimistic that we can go on a path for healing, and indeed we heal. Maybe the question should be, Comrade Baguma and my colleagues here, healing from what? When you look at I was appearing somewhere and I told my colleagues that if anybody should be healing, it should start with NRM political party.
Why?
NRM, I like how fast you came in.
Yeah, because
why? NRM political party. Because when you look at our primaries, the way we went through our primaries, it was summarized by our own chairman, who later on, when he was asked as to why, he seemed not to come out forcefully to demoralize the independent candidates. He had this to say, and I will paraphrase it. You see, our own primaries were problematic. Now, I will just identify 1, 2, 3, 4 problems that were in the primaries of NRM, and as to why the healing should start from NRM. You had situations in Zimbabwe where people died shot. They were shot. They died. And others were bundled and put in prison, and the election just went on. And some candidates were announced that they were the winners. Those were the flag bearers. They are the ones who presented themselves finally to Justice Byabakama's election, and they went through. In those circumstances, don't we need hearing at the level of those who lost their loved ones and at the level of those who lost the election in such circumstances?
Are we,
And it was not-
hopeful that that will happen?
Yes, you see, there is nothing impossible. Reason being, nobody thought, for instance, and I'm glad, for instance, my two colleagues here, and particularly Ochieno, is a Pan-Africanist. We are, at least all of us here, are well versed with the history of apartheid in South Africa. Nobody at any one time, given the history of apartheid in South Africa, thought or could even imagine to think it would appear as a nightmare that Nelson Mandela would emerge from a 27 prison, come and forgive his captors. Nobody would imagine that Mandela's regime, and even subsequently after him, would forgive those who perpetuated, including a man like Bossa, who perpetuated the Sharpeville massacre. There are many instances in South Africa where we saw that indeed the South Africans and the frontline state members who are supporting the cause, and even us here who were faithful students of history, could have faith that such people would be forgiven. But finally, they were forgiven, and South Africa went on a healing path, and they are now moving forward. With some problems here and there, of course, we know what is happening in NSC. Therefore, bringing that experience back to Uganda, I want to believe where we have come from, and I'm glad we are looking at our matter, the Archbishop Janan Ruwomu. Who would imagine, for instance, that the faithfuls, all Christians across the board, and people of goodwill, you don't even have to be a Christian, would actually forgive their mean family, including our President Museveni, who later on has incorporated the children of Amin. They are in government here and they are working. After the killing of the Archbishop, the very first one of Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Boga Zaire. You can imagine that jurisdiction. But we have since healed. Therefore, there is nothing beyond God's grace. We want to believe that God's grace is upon us, has been upon us. Our anthem is very clear about it. And although society is punctuated with all manner of problems, but I take confidence in the fact that at least there are still some godly values which we espouse, and we shall cling on the little that is left to make good of what is supposed to be made good.
Honorable Tian, you've had your colleagues. You said no, healing is difficult. So would the opposition have any role, therefore, if by some godly intervention, divine intervention, healing processes were to happen?
I actually did not suggest it was impossible. At the introduction, I was giving this a contextual political reality, a response to the question of healing, and not the what would others be an academic theological argument. Number one. But number two, as it happens, a major national media network has a name for me, and one of that is that apparently I am the most optimistic Ugandan, and that was derived from the fact that I was, and I'm the most optimistic UPC. Gets a bit cheeky, but when you combine the two, I concede and I accept that title, that I'm genuinely an optimist, as an optimistic Ugandan. But number two, to broaden the context of the conversation, including as my brother Rugama refers, for the record, in terms of political reconciliation, I was the first person, and I think it's very important for your audience to note that in May 2005, I called a press conference at Uganda House in Kampala, the party headquarters. Milton Obote was still alive, so it was with his authority that I called a press conference. One, to ask for a full investigation of all the conflicts in Uganda, starting with the then nearest, but one which was Luweero, and then northern Uganda, and then take us back to, if we so wish, up to independence or 1900, whichever we chose. But as a nation state, that we needed to have that conversation. But number two, which was the primary object of my press conference, was to say that Uganda People's Congress is committed to a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I had the privilege years back to engage deeply as a matter of policy as a party, and with my late president, including a visit to South Africa to meet my ANC colleagues and have these related conversations. So when I say so, I'm not saying that it's an impossible or is it not desirable. I am suggesting that under the current arrangement, I don't see it as feasible. And indeed, as Timothy suggests, when you go through an election process, because this is the context, in which we have winners, some through the back door, and we have losers, some who are doubtful too. You know, Milton Obote says that sometimes some losers, even in UPC, when they lose the election, all of a sudden they think the winners are less UPC than themselves. In other words, naturally in life we have some terrible losers, and we've had some terrible losers in this country, including the losers of 1980 general elections. I believe most of them were terrible losers because they're genuinely bad losers, they're genuinely realistic losers, and they lost badly. But you can also have very terrible winners, and that is one of the things that young Timothy is talking about. When a nation like Uganda, and Comrade Rugama, you need to lead on this because you presented yourself as a representative of NRM and somebody whom I regard, and you concede this is a conversation that we need to speak to the nation. The burden of responsibility for leadership in this country is Mr. Museveni as president. Post-election, regardless of the outcomes, the winner is him. Normally, for my 40 plus years of active life in politics, both at home and abroad, once election is concluded, the first statement, I think that's what Timothy was saying, the first statement that comes out of a victor is, yes, oh, it has been heavy. It has been heavy. Fantastic win, isn't it? That is to electorate. The next statement is humility. You thank God and thank the people who've elected you, and you declare that you've been given the burden of responsibility and you will not let down your citizens over the next 5 years. And you then go on to say you're going to govern for all. And usually, even if you won by 80%, you refer to the 20%. We had you the 20% who didn't vote for us, we had you. Is that a message you ever hear? Comrade Baguma, is that a message you hear from our leaders? Whether at national level or personal constituency? You don't. That was the basis of my argument, that in the environment in Uganda today, in which there is an election which NRA has won, and it's an openly contested election, and I really didn't want to take that tone in this conversation. I believe that 2026 election is the most controversial election since independence. An election in which social media is raw, and immediately it's unturned. You get, even in my own constituency, there is one allegedly doing the rounds in a place called Guaragwara Primary School in my constituency. You see people ticking, and somebody is actually expressing, yes, we are doing very well ticking, you just take care of the other place. That is an extraordinary stuff. Now, after that outcome, leadership ought to emerge. And I agree from both the governing guys and the winners and people like myself who believe are responsible citizens to call for modesty and moderation. And I'm saying that is the tone that I don't see. I see tone of victors who are chest thumping and tones of people who are either on the run or losers who think you've lost, you've been cheated, and the person who's cheated you is trying to punch you. There is a quick one, a social media round that is that went around over a loser in Tororo, and turns out, unfortunately, this loser is substantially liked by a group and substantially hated by a group, and the group of the haters say, "Ha, there they go, they lost it. Why don't they just get off?" And one individual amongst actually the not likers of the loser said that, you know what, actually, I really pray that that individual lost, and I really don't give, But it is very clear that the individual does not seem to have lost fairly. So that individual has got a right to make noise. So if you consider the context and history of NRA in 1980, and then these guys did not go to court, and these guys today, 45 years later, they have no evidence. I am near City Square. They have no evidence. They've never presented it to any court that we won this and it was taken. They lost that one and they picked that one. They've not shown it, And then you come here today and we do what we've done today. And instead of actually closing ranks and say, guys, the irregularities, the challenges, and, let's come together. I am saying that's the message I'm not seeing.
All right.
And I'm really praying and I'm hoping that from this program of yours, Comrade Baguma, that message emerges. And particularly because the message that emerges around the time of Janani Luwum, I ask, where are the Janani Luwums of today in this country? I know Desmond Tutu, I know Archbishop Odama, I know Archbishop Ochola, and I know the Anglican Archbishop the other day gave a fantastic presentation. But I'm just giving food for thought. Mm-hmm. Where the Luwums of today, and where the Desmond Tutus of those days.
We're about to go for a break, but I wanted to just get a minute or so to you, Timothy Chemonges. And I'm really following up that question. And we will come back to it when we get out of the break. But there have been efforts previously talking about national dialogue, which I think was national reconciliation. Groups of women, I think, something called Situation Room. I think it was the Interreligious Council. The elders, I think it was the retired judge, Ogora, and all that. Recently, we have also had a group of opposition members going to meet the president, and that created a real hullabaloo. In fact, for some people, it seems like it's extremely risky to try to reach out to the one you described as the strongest, and also the one who holds the key, a big chunk of the key to reconciliation. It seems it's very, very risky to go meet him. You get demonized, chastised, publicly shamed. So how do we heal when we are in this kind of situation? But we are going for a break, and when we come back, Timothy, we will start with you on that particular issue. Don't go away. It's the bottom line, Church of Uganda Family TV, and we are looking at the issues post-election. Around the time that we are commemorating Saint Janani Luwum, are we able to heal as a country? Can we move forward? What lies ahead? And what does... and now, of course, Bwana Otieno has brought us the issue of Martin Luther, reminded us. So we have all this context. What does this and what can we learn from it? Don't go away. We come back shortly. We just go for a short break. welcome back. And thank you for staying with us. It's the bottom line on Family TV. It's your Church of Uganda television. We run from 9 to 11. We've done with our first hour. And we're looking at this country after the election. A lot of healing has been talked about, and not just after this election, even after the previous elections. There's accountability, of course, if you talk about healing and what has happened. But also, we look at the road ahead. Can healing happen? Shouldn't healing happen? Isn't it an issue that we should be focusing on a lot? Others call it national dialogue, whatever processes. And in studio, if you are just joining us, is Dr. Daniel Rugarama, is Mr. Timothy Chemonges and Honorable Cheno, who are digesting this with me. When we went, I had asked you, Timothy, healing and the issues that we were looking at. Shouldn't we be investing in this with all our might, with all our resources, despite the difficulty that we look at, despite the context that we have talked about? Because won't we ban this country if we don't?
Thank you, Baguma. I absolutely agree with you. The national unity, the national cohesion is in the best interest of this country, primarily. And that if the unity is realized, it has a ripple effect in all other sectors, of the society. I think that where we find ourselves, unfortunately, is that the country seems to have abundance of extremism, both on the side of government, on the side of opposition, and all the other players. Everyone seems to hold their position from the extreme side. And there are very few moderates who are willing to say, let's try to discuss. And even those that opt to take the moderate positioning seems to receive extreme reaction and response from the public. That any attempt to extend an olive branch, mostly to the president, it is the reaction that you receive is extreme, and that you are better off not being in the camera or not even in any visibility by the public. I think it's on the risk that arises from this extremism that you also have a section of the public that seem to think that we cannot sit to discuss anything. In fact, we've already lost everything and there's really nothing to discuss. Probably also it extends to, we recently saw a delegation that went to State House to meet the president, largely from the political parties. And at least to the extent that they have disclosed, the discussion was around how do we move on post the elections. Today the results came out. We saw one of the members who went to visit the president left transition, moved to the NRM. Of course, even when we may not be part of the meeting, sometimes you are tempted to think that when you see these actions, it clearly communicates to you the direction, the thinking. That any effort, irrespective of individual, if you attempt to take an individual position of engaging the president, the likely results things would likely result to the self-interest and not the national interest. This has happened in the past, and probably there has not been so much results that we've realized. And so I think that probably moving forward, the risk should be left to institutions such as the Interreligious Council, the political parties, the civil society organizations that meet, so that you mitigate the risk both of individuals meeting President Museveni, and I listened to Professor Yusuf Nsibambi, and he explained of how the president is a good man, contrary to what he's been hearing and all these kind of things. Because it's a risk that you expose yourself once you meet President Museveni. Is genuinely an amazing person.
Magnetic.
So to avoid that risk, we ought to now operate as institutions, not to see maybe one of the religious leaders meeting him, and then you tomorrow you see maybe another political player meeting him. It exposes and undermines the whole process. And unfortunately, where we are today, the question of national cohesion, national dialogue starts and ends with the president. And that is the only person that bears the direction of what that would look like. Any other effort would likely be undermined, and I think that it must start from there to ensure that we realize it. Of course, there are concerns in terms of even whether he's interested in this. As we were discussing here during the break, you listen to the comments after the elections. Definitely has won, and there is very little that you can do about that. And he is the president, definitely. So the magnanimity that you would expect is not there as such. And so you are left to be in a place that probably this may take a bit of time for us to get to a place where we come to a round table as a country and look at our problems, and everyone finds a share in the table.
Daniel Rugarama, we commemorate the late Archbishop General. There have been attempts to associate that with reconciliation and what, but on the other side, and I always say, the truth cannot be established sometimes when you're talking about political positions. Some insist that he actually knew about guns and he. So reconciliation, like they have said, can also be a risky venture. So if we relate Archbishop General Room, should people put themselves forward for martyrdom?
What a question.
Yeah, because that's the context.
I don't think, first of all, that the late Archbishop Janana Ruum set out to make a matter out of himself. Let's begin from there. The circumstances at the time, right from when Idi Amin took power in those 70s, up to the 1977 and some years thereafter when Amin was overthrown, were punctuated with the overthrow of the constitution and any other means that could make anybody take the leadership at that time as democratic and pro-people. It is therefore very interesting that if one was asked a question, which indeed in a manner of speaking you have asked, if Janana Ruum was to resurrect today and come back to Uganda, would he regret that we have made no progress from when he was shot dead?
I will just give you information about a cartoon that appeared, I think, yesterday.
Yes.
By one spy.
Spy again, Sentong.
And the bishop, somebody in a cassock of purple of a bishop was asking at the grave of the late Janana Ruum, said, why don't you come back and intervene? He said, no, won't I be kidnapped?
No,
And then the bishop asked by who said, okay, leave me alone. So when he said if he came back now, I remember.
I missed that. But of course, we know Spire. Sometimes he gets it right. But without, at the risk, of course, of being taken for a radical support of NRM, of which I really don't mind. Maybe the radical bit of it I would mind. I can tear a ripe banana when I see one. I know for a fact that NRM has made tremendous scores on many fronts. And one of them is the observance of human rights, although there are some areas to be improved upon, like it is everywhere really, because for instance we can even critique, and correctly so, some of the human rights credentials of those who put themselves up there, the Americans, the English and French and etc. At the same time, when you want to juxtapose the Amin time when Archbishop Jenan Rum died, the circumstances under which he died, and with what we are experiencing now in Uganda under the NRM leadership, we are miles away from what was happening in the 1970s, especially in the regime of Idi Amin. To the extent, therefore, that even when we concede to the fact that there is a need for improvement, because you can never have 100%, and the population just spoke not a long time ago, on the 15th of January, that we are at 72%. And had probably the population been awakened enough, who knows, maybe the percentage would have even improved to 80%. And by that, of course, I'm not saying that the elections were, because that is one of the voices through which we can hear what people are saying. I'm not saying that the voting bloc represented the entire population, but at least it is one of the avenues through which we can hear the people's voice. In the same light, therefore, constitutionalism, observance of human rights, respect of the rule of law, the NRM has done a commendable job opening up space for civil society, has done a commendable job, but, and this but is very important. There are areas where NRM has made mistakes which it should not have made, like closing some of these civil society organization, chapter 4, etc., here and there, and probably if we examined and we became more conscious, we would have done a better job. Yes, the media, mass media, where people can express their views. My brother, senior brother Ocheno here comes and lambasts NRM, and it is his right, we agree with him. Then somebody else also maybe on radio. These views, they help sharpen the direction of the country. If, and I hope, those that are in the position to take decisions on behalf of the country listen, and when they listen, they improve. It's my submission, therefore, that what Jenan Rum died for, and him being considered the matter, we need, and we have in a number of respects, tried to implement to better, to make his death relevant. Otherwise, if it is just left as a mere national holiday and prayers in church and celebration, then that becomes a very big problem. But I'm glad, as I conclude on this, I'm glad that when you look at the aspects that the church at that time talked about, the areas which the Archbishop Janan Ruum pointed out for improvement, not actually at that time overhaul, because everything was actually dead, and probably that also informed some groups, especially now like the Museveni and the NRM, to go take up arms, come and improve what they thought was terribly lacking. And to the extent that constitutionalism, to the extent that respect of human rights, observance of the rule of law are concerned, and there were matters that the late Archbishop Janan Ruum was talking about, and called on the government to ensure that they are respected. I want to submit, and respectively so, that NRM as a government has done a commendable job, although I concede to the fact that there is still room for improvement.
While you were speaking, Bana Ocheno was shaking his head, seemingly in disagreement. Did I read you well?
Yeah, my brother spoke quite a lot, so I'm not quite sure which, but some of them may not be particularly, I may not necessarily be precise, but I think I'll respond. But quickly, on the point raised by Timothy on the difficulty with which opposition leaders find engaging with Mr. Museveni. This is a leadership question. It's a political climate, and I think that's why contextualizing this within the broad spectrum of Janan Ruum is extremely important. My hope was that, particularly once granted a public holiday, I totally agree with Daniel that the conversation should be about never again. And if it were never again, the head of the household in this country is the president, elected or not elected. I believe he was not elected in 1985, 6, and I'm not quite sure which election of his has validated that, but that's a different issue. That's a political question. But he is at State House, and I don't throw stones there, past there. The spiritual parents, leaders, particularly of the established churches, Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, the Islamic Church, and indeed, of course, the Muslim Church. But those are traditional leaders for us in terms of faith groups. These are the people who should be able to create for us an enabling environment in which there is a national conversation. Now, if it, as Timothy says, that every time somebody goes to meet Mr. Museveni, he comes back speaking double Dutch, there is every reason for everybody else to get concerned. In my own political party, Uganda People's Congress, as I said, we are officially the political party of national truth and reconciliation, and totally committed to talking in diversity. But if some of my colleagues in UPC find it convenient to go and meet Mr. Museveni in darkness and come out and try and speak vernacular in a way of attempting to explain why and what kind of relationship they've got with Mr. Museveni, we've got every right and reason not only to doubt, to find it objectionable. And I think that's sort of the climate in the country at the moment. I want to say this, that under independence, Comrade Baguma, it's my party that offered a government of national unity at independence, and is fundamentally erroneously presented that the UPC-KY alliance was as a result of convenience from UPC. It was not convenience. We had won the elections. We did not need the KY numbers, but what we needed was an environment in which we had KY, DP, and UPC, all of us actually sitting around the table and forming a government by consensus. Remember, we talk about healing, reconciliation, and moving forward. So we've got a new nation state. We have our conflicting interests. Perhaps we went ahead through our campaigns leading to independence. But how do we harmonize questions of our national unity going forward? That is one. Number two, after 1980 general elections, which UPC won and won convincingly, and DP won in Buganda convincingly, except I think one parliamentary seat, and NRA lost across the country except by chance one seat somewhere in Toro. NRA guys went to the bush in a very atrocious war. Amin had tortured this country. The official UPC position, and I'm saying this for these purposes, I remember as a young man, was reconciliation, reconstruction, and development. You see, that is leadership. So for those of us, even youngsters and students, we saw that this is the message in a new setting. But guess what? Because of the continued NRA terror, and because of the continued propaganda against the government of the day, and because of the difficulty in trying for us to reconcile as a nation state, President Milton Obote, and you now see my message, President Milton Obote found it in his rightful place, and this is a message for Mr. Museveni, found it in his place to call for a meeting, guess what, of religious leaders, a meeting of religious leaders in President's office, and say, look, there is Luero war. I mean, our people had suffered under Idi Amin. We've gone through elections. You may have had your grievances and everything else. Your continued propaganda through your dubious foreign interests agenda, and you know which media networks are pushed by imperialist foreign interests. We are Pan-Africans here. You know, it's not helping our country, you know, to settle. So why don't we settle this question of election once and for all? Because in any case, you even gave it leave to feed the guys in the bushes in the late way of election rigging. We want to heal as a nation. So if you DP think that you've got numbers that you believe if you went to court, or went to court, would prove that you won the elections, you know, bring those numbers in this meeting, you know, where DP leaders and I think CP leaders were also there, and the religious leaders, Cardinal Subuga and I think Archbishop Yono Koth and others were there. All key national religious leaders were in a meeting called by the president. And Obote said this, and this is for the record, it's official. If you bring this information to this table, which shows that DP won the elections, I would want you to go through the formal process of going through the court, because we believe it is in constitutionalism. But Obote declared that should you do so, I will resign as president pending the legal process. These are things that are not giving sufficient attention, and so I'm delighted with the Church of Uganda to have this media house, to join as part of the media as a fourth estate. So this is public information informing people. People don't know this information. So Obote did that in 1982, and did what? And he told me this actually in the repeat, but it's also in his notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda. Said, look, Semugere went mum, quiet. And the person who broke the silence, according to him, was Cardinal Subuga, who said, no, you know, okay, that's the matter with the past, we'll leave it like that. And what is my message? My message is we need leadership, in this case leadership from the president, to be an exemplary leader. Say, look, okay, we've gone through an election process, you may not like the results, but you know, some of you maybe, and indeed as Timothy said, this is not necessarily about the presidency only. It's about parliament, local council positions, and others. You may not like the results. Some of you may have lost, but you know, there's always another time. And I've seen that actually. Some community leaders around the country say that to their electors in a very nice way. As I said, I was in a funeral the other day, and I think it was actually an Anglican bishop, a reverend at a funeral, who was very nice about it. You know, if you lost, please, you know, it doesn't take a long time. It's hardly 4 years away. You'll come back campaigning, and you'll always have your chance. That is the context of the conversation we're having today. And maybe I may be taking a lot more time for this, but I'm saying national reconciliation is possible. National reconciliation is a necessity, but unfortunately, the foundation for that is truth-telling. And unfortunately for that, people's ability to concede ground, you know, unfortunately, we are wrapped up by impunity, sense of impunity, and some kind of sense of entitlement. I promised that as president of Uganda People's Congress, I would invite Mr. Museveni to Uganda House. You know, he would not have to climb the stairs. I'll live on the 6th floor. And maybe, you know, I would invite him for golf. And in the likely event that I'm president of the Republic of Uganda, I'll invite him for tea at State House. And whatever the case, I'll also visit his home and we'll have a cup of tea. and consult with them an elder statesman. It is extremely important that this country talks transition. It's extremely important that this country talks reset. This country learns from Luwum, learns from Desmond Tutu, learns from the Reverend Jesse Jackson. And as Africans, we really don't have enough time. China is going up the spaces. The sooner we stopped getting petty, the sooner we enjoyed our little wealth without grabbing too much, the better really for our grandchildren.
Timothy, I liked the term double dutch. I used to hear it in music and I went looking for it. But it was a game
Going to Museveni.
of jumping between two counter rotating ropes.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, it refers to speaking unintelligibly or sometimes derogatively, you can say gibberish.
Yeah.
But he's talking that when people go to meet President Museveni, they kind of come out and their explanations become a little hazy.
Yeah.
But also,
Heavy tongue.
yeah, they develop heavy tongues. But also the other thing
Yeah.
is you do not see institutions, and you are referring to these institutions, religious institutions, cultural institutions. We do not see institutions coming up strongly. Pro-healing, pro-reconciliation.
Yeah.
Maybe they would be listened to. So there is also this thing that you expect President Museveni to take leadership on this, and if he doesn't take leadership, allegedly, then nothing will happen. But you see, the president has also been quite clear that you see there were 10 million voters who did not come to vote, registered voters who did not come to vote. And he's very firm that if they had come to vote, those would be his votes.
Yeah.
You have the president who says, even these 2 point something million votes, which went the others because they cheated me, these were my votes. So you also have, you know, the president who has expressed himself and said, I am also aggrieved because
He's
I've
also
been cheated.
suffering with grievance.
I would be having more. So we seem to be talking about a situation that is too far away.
Yeah. That's true, and it indicates that there seems to be grievances on all sides, whether others actual or others are imaginative or perceived in that manner. It's something that should be brought on the table. Is leadership required in this case? I think there is definitely need for leadership, especially from President Museveni. I think that the opposition and probably other players, listening to them, they seem to push this position that as we come to the table, we must come as equals, which is, in the current circumstances, it's an impossibility. Because
Timothy, do you mind? Just 30 seconds. The question of coming as equals, I totally agree with you that if anybody would think that they'd want to go as equals when maybe the other person is 82 and the great-grandfather, things like that, you know, and the numbers. I suspect the issue is whether or not we are going around table with openly and honestly.
yeah,
I'm not sure it's necessarily about equality, but you're absolutely right. It's about equality in terms of power and authority and voting rights. I'm not quite sure. I think it's really the context, you know, whether or not there's goodwill for us to sit round table as a family and have a conversation. In such a conversation, children involved. My 11-year-old daughter is a fantastic lead Democrat in my family environment, but she's not necessarily an elder in the family.
yeah. You know, Bakuma, when you look at the operations of the inter-party IPOD, the inter-party organization
Yes,
for
yes.
dialogue, part of the concerns, and I've listened it recently from PFF leadership, indicating they are a bit hesitant to join IPOD, and part of the concern is around the posturing nature of the institution and the domineering nature of NRM, specifically President Museveni, and it's a concern that they hold. It's the same thing with the National Unity Party, raising the same concern. And so you get a feeling that there is a desire for equality in the dialogue, which in our current setting is a bit far-fetched, and the need for players to recognize their position and where they are at in the current discourse, and what they really need as they engage in this dialogue. And probably I'm convinced that the opposition need to dialogue first. The Interreligious Council and the religious groups need to dialogue at that level first to understand exactly what is it that we need, even as we engage President Museveni, if that opportunity is there. Because ultimately you realize that whereas President Museveni still holds a lot of influence in terms of how things should look like or how things are likely to unfold, the attitude, the perspective, and the concerns from the other players seems to indicate that there is no goodwill even to participate in this, to sit with President Museveni himself in this table, notwithstanding that he is not willing. But if that opportunity came, there would not be that sort of. But nonetheless, I think that President Museveni, being the person who he is, there are things that he ought to do, even in the worst case scenario that there is no any dialogue. We do have political prisoners in prison. We do have some of the leading opposition leaders in the run. We have another in prison. I think with or without dialogue, there are things that should happen to demonstrate goodwill. Political prisoners should be released. I think that Kyagulanyi, who is on the run, should be looked after. I know probably there would be concerns that why are we looking for him? But I think that there should be grace extended to him, to look for him and bring him on board, even if he doesn't be part of the government, but assure him of his safety and of his place in the country.
And that's the healing.
The retired Kizza Besigye, I think that for whatever reason he is in prison and for whatever actions or accusations that is being put against him, he should be released. He should be out. I think those are some of the things that the president should be able to undertake. Where there will be a dialogue or not, those are some of the things that probably would help to demonstrate some goodwill from his side. But I think also the president ought to take a bit of moderation and modesty in how he engages the public and other players. The level of magnanimity, really, that I have won and I'm the president and there is nothing that probably will change. There is need for us to move as one. Of course, lastly for me is the need for the president to limit the continuous practice of thinking. And I know the president is a very bright man. That even when you see individuals going to him to attempt to introduce the discussions around national dialogue, he clearly knows where this is ending. And the action to continuously take the same path clearly indicates that he is also interested in the same results as it has always come. That when you see him meeting some individuals, you are likely to see what Yusuf Mseveni got. And so I think that there needs to be some level of deliberate effort by the NRM colleagues, by the president in demonstrating that they are in charge and that there is a process to which we may not ultimately have everyone be on board, but a process to ensure that we realize that. And everyone at least feeling that we have a stake in this country?
Daniel Rugarama, this is our situation. One, institutionally, we have a lot of fractures. Civil society, religious, institutions, political institutions. There are a lot of fractures. These are fractured entities. You have the question of an agenda. What is the agenda for national dialogue, for reconciliation? Timothy has ably talked about some of the healing things that can be done, even without having groups meeting. But what is the agenda? How do we shape the agenda? Who represents what or who? And so that's it. If on one side, Daniel Rugarama tells you, we have done very well on human rights, on everything. So what are we dialoguing about? What's our agenda? But also the practice that Timothy so carefully talks about, that national dialogue or dialoguing means corruption. I mean, and that every time there is dialoguing, it becomes corruption. You imagine when you are yellow, you talked about bananas and how sweet they are. I think you are deliberate knowing that they ripen when they are yellow. And so these are the things, fractured entities, who goes to represent who, how do we choose who, how do we therefore form an agenda when we have different, positions about how we are performing and the situation, and then co-option as a method of dialoguing. We seem to be going nowhere, just in circles, Daniel.
You see, Comrade Baguma, there are many things, as you are asking the question, that were going through my mind. The leadership the NRM has offered to this country, probably in comparative terms, when you compare it with other leadership elsewhere, you will say, well, they are doing well after all, because you begin giving examples elsewhere, and we seem not to be having very good examples, even from our would-be highly rated democracies that we can talk about, because look, you know my background, Baguma, and you will permit me say this. You have an American leadership that goes and captures a democratically constitutional president from another country, takes him to their country to face their so-called justice system, which is also very problematic. What my brother, senior brother Ochieno was talking about, we have a Jesse Jackson who dies dead. You have got situations in the European countries, and their credentials are not any better. So you come to NRM, and the scores which NRM organically has made, you are tempted to say, I think we are doing great. But when in real terms, if you sat down to make proper analysis, you will say we have got a lot of room to improve here, there. But certainly, I will not toe the line of whoever, and I'm glad, of course, my comrades here are not saying that NRM has not achieved something that should be talked about on a media like this one. What, therefore, would be the agenda if there was to be the reconciliation, national reconciliation, if we were to hear the grievances have been pointed out by different, when you look at the reports of the Interreligious Council, they are recommending several things they have talked about. I'm glad they are living by example. When you look at their cooperation, when you look at the way they do their things in the lives of the faithfuls, when you look at the different political parties, fractured as they are, by the way, you're even right. They're terribly fractured, the internal bickering, they are dividing themselves and subdividing themselves. You are tempted to think that probably NRM does not have a credible opposition that they can say, you come and we talk together, and that is why they opt for what you are talking about, co-option. That if, for instance, I congratulate NRM for having brought back Honorable Yusuf Nsubambe. He used to be our very good teacher in the School of Law. I really congratulate NRM upon that, and I wish that we can go on the fishing expedition and even get more. In fact, I recommend, I believe the powers that be are listening to me, please, you look at my senior brother, he was Ochieno, and do the needful. I will be happy to work with him in some ambassadorial role somewhere. Now, having said that,
in Jesus' name, I cancel that.
having said that, Comrade Maguma.
Yes. What would be the agenda?
Therefore, the national agenda is very well known. The national agenda is contained in our 15-point program, which we have been, as NRM, fighting. Because even when you look at the different, by the way, manifestos of different political parties, time and again, during the electoral cycle, they are rotating, saying the same thing, but saying it differently. Be it person agriculture, be it person trade, be it person infrastructure, be it person education, health, the same thing. But they are saying it differently, and probably the implementation methods also may differ. But at the end of the day, there is this one issue. A colleague of mine in the Pan-African ranks called Brian Kagoro, a development economist. I don't know, you know him? Yeah. Brian Kagoro?
Yeah.
He says that Africa is not broke. Africa is broken. Now, maybe the question there should be, who has broken Africa? This is the whole big
This should be
debate.
our agenda for healing.
Yes. So therefore, if there is somebody that has broken Africa, and Uganda is part of Africa, our journey for healing, if we do not diagnose the problem with microscopic exactness, and we apply a healing knife, we may keep on rotating around a subject that we have not studied very well, and we end up not actually curing the disease.
Bwana Ochieng. If indeed we were to hear, what are those things we should be coming together around? What would be constituting the agenda items that would then, hopefully, if resolved, lead to our healing? And going ahead, looking ahead, are there any openings that can be pursued around this?
Because it's a season for Lent, and because a critical section of our own population are also celebrating Ramadan, maybe we should go for a 40-day fast. I'm actively joining part of that, and make sure that at the end of it all, we reset ourselves back to our founding principles and founding values that are consistent with the national motto that the UPC gave this country, but chucked a little bit from my Busoga College, Miri, for God and my country. You realize that actually leaders rarely use those ones in their speeches. They rarely use those ones to close their speeches. I'm saying leaders, I'm not to talk about an individual. So just think about it. Daniel possibly raises one of the reasons why it is difficult to pinpoint. And I had intended not to refer. Part of the problem with this NRA regime is that somehow Mr. Museveni is not a Democrat. It is also very clearly the case that Mr. Museveni is not a pluralist, and is unapologetic about that because there is evidence to that. If you trace it back, and I don't know where Daniel was in the 7 of 1977, 78, 79, 80, who did not really believe in pluralist polity, and Museveni of the Fronasa days, lest you forget. And that Museveni is the same Museveni, except that he's now a fantastic 80-plus-year-old man with huge experience of ruling a country and influencing massively the region, and serving fantastically interesting friends of his, both within the region and abroad, outside this continent. There are nuances that suggest that most of our friends in NRA don't know how to collegiate. In other words, the problem in this country is that the majority of the leaders in NRA don't recognize that you can be an Acholi and it's fine to dance with the Japadola and walk home without prejudice. I'm not bringing identity, but I'm putting an emphasis there. But you can also be a Munyankole, and within there will be sects without prejudice of Hima, Iru, and it's okay. And that some people rear long-horned cattle and use sticks. But most importantly, that therefore people like me are inherently anti-imperialist. And people like me are unapologetically African nationalists. And that people like me are ideologically driven, progressive democratic left, and so therefore Uganda People's Congress with a very specific ideological identity, a worldview of this country, a worldview of this continent, and a worldview of the world. But I'm also very clear that there are certain people who share views and values that are not like mine, and some of them may be my family members. That in Nagongera, in my family, there'll be people who are not necessarily leftists, who are dubiously so excess conservatives that they think Trump is a friend of Jesus in the Middle East somehow, kind of stuff. Now, that I think is the problem. Global polity, and since we're discussing post-pluralist election, I note that people don't know that somebody can't be UPC and a friend, and somebody can be DP and a friend. The NRA guys are finding it extremely difficult to come to terms with the reality, that there will be UPC people who are not their enemies or their opponents. And Daniel seemed to suggest here that you can only be a decent Ugandan if you join NRA. You can only be a useful Ugandan, serve Uganda by being in NRA. Like in my case, how can you be in an organization that has so massively, fundamentally failed this country in the last 40 years? But I don't want to go into that kind of stuff. So, but I'm using it for to make this point really. It's not a point score or anything. So that is the problem. So unless and until we reach such a stage, you realize that the goodwill that my brother here suggested, and why I deliberately brought it at independence in 1962, that we, the people of this country, a new nation state has been found. We have monarchists, we have some crude chauvinists, in fact some of them were very irritating chauvinists in 1962, but we recognize they are part of this country. Milton Obote in 1963 told a fantastic friend of his who wrote his autobiography, Kenneth K. Ingham, so you'll be familiar with them, the two of you, Professor Ingham. And Professor Ingham told me this in his home in Bristol, that, they spoke to Obote in 1963 on the Buganda question. And Obote rudely gave them a response. I never got to know what proposal they were giving. And said, Ken, you people, you leave, you'll return to your Britain. We shall remain here. So as Ugandans, we will have to find a solution that serves us, because we will have to learn to live together as Ugandans. Grant is unfortunate, 1966-67, people have a different version, a different story of what happened as a country. So that is the bottom line. How do we live together as citizens of this country in diversity? If we came to realize that, the formula simply becomes massively academic. As basic as what young Timothy was talking about. All that Mr. Museveni simply says, fellow citizens, I am now an old man. I've learned. have grown. Where's the young boys and girls? I told you so. When I went to the bush, I was mistaken. I think we broke people's legs for nothing. Maybe we could have done it differently. It's not going to return anything, but it's a sense of humility and acknowledgement. By the way, when in 1986, 87, we sold off everything that the UPC built for this country, we were wrong. As a country, we need to learn from those. Maybe are there people who are still members of the cooperative movements and the experts who can help us to review this kind of thing? We need a policy review. We need to take a new direction. Something as basic as that will endear many UPC people to say, look, this guy has learned lessons, he's got a country at heart. You people, we know that people were broken into rail wagons, in Mukura. That was unacceptable. He says, oh, that was a mistake of a few, kind of stuff. That tone is not only defensive, but it's a tone that does not create an enabling environment for us. But for me, finally, as a political leader, it is true that the democratic opposition need to play their role. Our problem in UPC is not a weakness in UPC, Timothy. The problem in UPC is institutional, it's structural. Had the NRA judiciary sorted out a UPC case in 2016, we wouldn't be here. Had they sorted out a UPC case in 2020, definitively, we wouldn't be here. Comrade Baguma, next year will be 5 years, since I tabled a matter that would have resolved the leadership of the question of the party completely. And that was a mere matter of judicial review, which should take place six months. I think shame on somebody who's involved and concerned about this thing. A judicial review matter has now taken 5 years, 4 judges, and 2 chief justices. So, what do you know? For me, as I said, as Ochieng, that's the only thing, except to go and break somebody's leg in Uganda House or to go to the bush. What is the alternative? So the whole thing returns to State House, break up institutions and systems. And Daniel, I think as we live here, you guys need to review that and see how much you failed people in the judicial system, how much you failed people in education, how much you failed people in health. It took me 2 hours to come from Kisasi, where I was having a meeting, to reach here. And partly disorganized traffic down the road, and partly somebody passing down the road, treating Ugandans as if they're equipments, without even understanding and appreciating economic implication, cost implication for this. So there is something atrociously wrong that we've done. But I am saying, as Ochieng of UPC, we don't need to hold on to that. And that's why I think today's topic is extremely important, healing. We need to heal because we need to reconcile. The truth is, we need an enabling environment in which all of us can move forward. When that happens, I'll be one of those people calling out the people in the opposition and in the governing side, meaning those people who are either the extremists or not. But I think broadly, the majority of Ugandans are tired, but predominantly the majority of the citizens in this country are decent people who want to be able to work together, to build together for the next generation for which this country was founded in diversity for all of us.
Timothy, you have 1.5 minutes to tell me from your perspective, what are those 2-3 priority things that should be on the agenda going forward?
I think that if dialogue gets to happen, or a conversation of some sort, I think top on the agenda would be the legal and regulatory reforms. And it's cross-cutting in terms of the livelihoods of the country, in terms of the electoral cycle, the political environment, the political parties, the state of political parties, what can be done in our legal framework to ensure that we streamline and ensure that things are clear, but also the parties involved have a say in it. I think the other is providing a platform to air out. I think that there is so much that different players have, and they have not got the opportunity to air it out,
To vent.
to vent and to, have it out. And I think for me, those would be 2 things that would be very key in terms of how we move forward.
Rugarama, but it's very difficult to give Rugarama 30 seconds to conclude because he will want to take 3 minutes of it. But let me make a very optimistic attempt.
I will try.
Tell him UPC elder is watching.
I will do my best.
Rugaram, with this fantastic, according to you, success of the NRM, is there a need to really go around, or should we just finish co-opting and finish the business?
No, I cannot in any way, and I hope I have not in any way suggested that NRM has scored 100%. I am alive to the fact that there is still huge room for improvement in our house. I, however, want to state in conclusion that if the Archbishop Janan Ruwomu was to come out of wherever he is now, and I believe in heaven, and he lands in Uganda now under the NRM regime, he would smile and pat us on the back, but to remind us that the journey is still available for us to walk.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for maintaining the I'm very happy now. My producer put a question at the end, and you have responded to it. You have responded to it, that if the late Janan Room appeared today, I think some of the things you talk about are the things you talked about. The question of detainees, I think, would be a question that Archbishop Janan Room would talk about. I think the question of tolerance or lack of it is a question that Archbishop Janan Room will talk about. The question of values and integrity versus the impunity that is pervasive in this country, I think, is something you're talking about. The question of corruption, abuse, and misuse of government resources, I think, public resources, I think, is a question that Archbishop Room will be talking about. The question of unemployment, by especially the young people, the youth, I think, is a question that Archbishop Room will be talking about. The question of education, the quality of the dropout, the issue of health services, I think these are questions that Archbishop Room will be talking about. And from my perspective, these are issues that would constitute an immediate part of the agenda that we need to be talking about as a country, because I think these are national issues. From the team here, Dr. Daniel Rugarama, Mr. Timothy Chemonges, Bwana Otieno, thank you so much. We really appreciate your coming, you're spending the time and night, and you, indeed, Derek, you said it's family time, but we also say you're on family TV.
Of course,
so you're actually communicating to families.
Indeed.
So it's indeed family time.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's your Church of Uganda TV. Baguma Tinka Simiro Richard, I'm your host. I'm very happy that you've stayed with us. Next Wednesday, we are together, hopefully, inshallah. Please, Lent and Ramadan are here. And you know, those are times of reflection and realignment of the things we do. Let's reflect and realign our behavior. From my production team, we all say good night and thank you so much for staying with us.
In a time where every decision matters, where leadership, governance, and accountability define our future, we break down this. This is